I'm walking a mile with Jeffery Straker this afternoon. Hi, Jeffrey. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Nice to chat with you.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you found some time for me before you head off to England.
Yeah.
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 Like, how does that work?
How does that work? That's that's kind of the question. Well, I mean, I can tell you kind of how it came about, if that's
Sure.
sort of a start of how it works. I mean,
Sure.
it's a funny thing. I mean, to bring listeners up to speed with what you're referring to, I'm going on a 9-date tour of England, leaving November the 1st, and it sort of wraps up around November 20th. And I did some shows in England in 2018, and just a few while I was kind of crisscrossing Europe, and I did 3 shows in the Netherlands, and I did a show in Denmark, and then I did 2 in England and 1 in Ireland. And the English and Irish shows were really fun. It went over really well, and I'd always wanted to go back, and I'd set up a tour in 2020, but then we all know what happened there.
Yeah.
So this is my first time going back, and so I had a few venues that wanted, had expressed interest in me coming back, and then a funny thing happened on Twitter, which was one day I was tweeting away about what we musicians do about some show here or some show there or what have you,
Right.
and lo and behold, His Honor Ralph Goodale, Canada's
Oh.
High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, replied to the tweet and said, "Hey, when are you coming to do a show in the UK?" And I tweeted back and said, "Whenever you invite me to Trafalgar Square." And then,
Gee, let me see if I can find some time on my calendar, right?
exactly. And then, no word of a lie, within less than an hour, I had a inbox message saying, "If you can get over here, we would happily host you."
Isn't that
And so
something?
that
Yeah.
was very lovely and generous and kind, and so that kind of sort of served as an anchor date as I chit chatted with them a little bit, and he and his wife Pam had been to several of my shows in Canada, like the Prairies before.
Yeah.
They were closer to the UK, so then that kind of served as an anchor date, and then I connected to the other venues I'd sort of had seen in 2018, and then reached out to some new ones, and honestly, like, the response was so wonderful. Like, it was almost like a bygone era we hear about in Canada, where these venues who knew very well I didn't have like a huge significant following there, they were like, "Yeah, we'd love to host you, listen to you online, and we know you don't have a following here, but we can work to promote the shows." And I wanted to kind of like hit my phone against the wall and say, like, "Are you really this wonderful?" Because it's not often that, like, and everyone was like that. So
So great. Oh,
I'm
that's
real
so cool.
I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, of course, Ralph Goodale has a long history with Saskatchewan, as do you, right? I mean,
Yeah,
his is a little longer than yours, I think, but
I think so.
yeah, yeah. And of course, wow, timing is everything, isn't that what we say? Like timing is
It's so
everything.
true. Yeah, yeah, it
So
really,
who
it
who
really
knew
is.
that Twitter would be your best agent?
I know. It's
So
really funny.
I get the sense that, I mean, I know that you're represented by Pacan Entertainment and that, but I kind of get a sense that you're a very independent kind of musician, right? Like
Hmm.
you manage your own affairs, right?
I do. Yeah, yeah. And I've I have worked for little periods of time here and there with different managers as we tried each other out, and have yet to find the right fit. Though an artist manager relationship is really um, just as tricky, if not trickier, than a partnership love
Yeah.
relationship. You're
Mm.
so intertwined, and you have to be, and you have to have, like, given that it's there has to be like an appreciation of each other. There also has to be a lockstep business vision, and then a lockstep skill set between the two of you to push things forward. That has to happen. So even though, like, I've been in those and then out of those, it's not like any ended like horrifically. You just
Yep.
kind of realize
Yep.
this is working or not, and
Yep.
then off you go. But all that said, I feel pretty comfy having done my stuff for quite a while too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have to say that if anybody was to ask me whether you should have a manager or not, I would say no. I mean, it's just the nature of artists, right? I mean, there are very few multi-year relationships between artists and managers, right? I mean, there are few, but like you say, it's so complex, and to understand your own, for a manager to understand your creative needs,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
and not have that conflict with the commercial requirements, right, because
yeah, yeah,
everybody's got to pay the bills, right, so
yeah.
yeah, so you must spend an awful lot of time doing that management. I love what you do on YouTube. I think that's great. I will come and see your show soon. I missed your last
Cool.
one at the basement. Sorry to say, but
No worries.
maybe I'll make it to your Christmas show. I'll maybe give that an honest try.
Yeah.
It's just I love what you do. I love how accessible you are online, and that it isn't heavily produced. There are some heavily, not heavily, but there are some really nicely produced pieces. But there's also some stuff that kind of comes off as a bit casual, right?
I hope so. That's kind of the hope. I mean, I find and this is just an observation of mine, but it seems over time that um, a lot of people are what they're looking for. I think, and people are maybe even sort of realizing this more themselves over time. What they're looking for in art or music or some sort of creative thing that they find themselves drawn to is I think they're looking for a connection, of course, but I think that connection comes through authenticity, and I think sometimes the authenticity can get lost in having maybe too much production, So I try to,
Yeah,
but like sometimes you got to sort of produce things well too. But it's for the reason that you're talking about, I'm talking about here, that some things I put out really are pretty, kind of like almost raw, and I think that serves a purpose.
it
I think
does.
people
Yeah.
see the real.
Yes, yes. And that's more typical of what they might expect from a live show.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And I think people tire of heavily produced, pre-recorded, multi-tracked, multi-months of technology, really.
Yeah, I mean, and the reality with what I do, like I'm a singer songwriter pianist, and often the performances I'm doing, they can be me at a piano with a guitar player, sometimes a trio, but like really of late, it's not been much bigger than that, and I really enjoy doing the duo or trio thing, but I mean, I'm not getting on a stage and like queuing a bunch of tracks.
Yeah, yeah,
It's just not what
right.
I do. I
Yeah,
can sort of see when, say, some of these, for example, these big spit and polish pop country bands get up there. I mean, I think that fans of that kind of expect to hear what they hear on the radio. So I get why they run, 20, 30, 40 tracks in the background because they're trying to give people what they heard in the first place. But in my case, I mean, it seems to be about the lyrics and the songs and the stories between the songs, and stripped down seems to really work.
yeah, yeah. Well, maybe we can just move on to most specifically. I mean, we could probably talk for days and days about all of that.
Probably.
But we're walking and we're halfway there already. So,
Yeah.
um,
Gosh.
you've got "Heavy Is the Burden," your official video being released today, and that song is there's something about that song, isn't there?
I hope so. I think so. I mean, it came from a very personal place on my end, and I released "Heavy Is the Burden" in a on a fully produced record, my
Yep.
2021 record, just before Sunrise, and it was like with a band and all the things. But then I recently released an acoustic EP, and this song is done acoustically with just acoustic instruments on this EP, and I think it works both ways. But it's a personal tune that comes from the grief of losing my mom 3.5 years ago, which was
Uh,
a big upheaval and a big, obviously
of course.
sad event and turning point in my life. Changed who I am forever. And so there was a lot to say about it. Of course, in a song, you only have like 3 or 4 minutes to say it, but you try to express that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've listened to a number of different versions of it, and the voice is comes through right in all of them. There is a sincerity there that's unmistakable, and it's like you never forget that when you're singing that song. And I mean, I know that's probably what you hope for in every song you perform, but it isn't always quite as poignant, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's not, and it was really like it was kind of funny because I actually worked on that song. I revised it about if not 299 times, 300, because I like the crux of it was there, but there was some nuances that I was like, I really want to say this in a certain way, kind of in a way that pays homage to my mom the best it could, but also expressed what I was going through in the grief I went through, and so that and I think people who've gone through grief, a lot of people have, they've reached out to me about the words in the song and have said things about them, which is sad and nice at the same time, I guess.
Yeah, I love this notion of "let me carry it with you."
Yeah, at the end of the chorus there. Yeah.
I mean, it kind of resolves to that, right? It's like, I'm going through this, but I'm also willing to share this burden that you may have, right?
Yep.
And
Yeah. And the thing I've learned is and that where that comes from is when my mom passed away. Like a mom is one of the closest people many people will ever have to them, and then when you lose that person, you experience a grief like probably you've maybe never experienced. And I had been really a total amateur with grief up until that. Anyway, I had very few people in my life had died, so therefore I had like zero conversations about death really. Then when mom died, I wanted to, like part of the process is talking to people about what you're feeling. At least I am somehow. Talker, and that's how I sort of work through things. And I just found people so uncomfortable with me talking about death, and I was like, for the love of God, like I don't know what ship you're on, but I know mine's gonna crash someday. This trip has a planned end, FYI. But people were by and large were terrified to discuss death, and so I was like, God, like this song hopefully will help to serve that role, and just saying to people like, you know what, like, we're all going through this.
Yeah.
With you, that sort of thing,
Yeah. And it's interesting the timing of all of that, right? So your mother passed away 3.5 years ago, and then it was almost like you had 2 years of introspection because of the pandemic, right? Like there was.
Yes, exactly.
I don't know. Did you see it in that way at all, or?
Yeah, I did. I mean, the song was finished like just pre-pandemic, but regardless, I did have an awful lot of time, with the song, but just like with in the wake of mom dying, just to like process / stew / do the things you do with it. Kind of, and I realized you can't do anything with grief. It's got to run its course. It's almost like a cold or something, like you can't speed it up. Good luck.
Right.
It's not happening. Right. It's just got to do its thing. And so I had these 2 years of being alone in my house, like for the worst time of all to deal with this. But I think in the end it was really good though. If you work with it, you can try to figure it out.
Sure. Well, it must have informed the songs that you selected for your EP, right? I mean, there must have been something about that period of introspection in light of the death of your mom that helped you to make decisions about what songs you're going to re-release in an acoustic format.
Yeah, and yes, absolutely. And I think the songs that I put on the acoustic EP all sort of were informed by mom passing away, like and they seemed like the obvious contenders. When it came time to putting, there were a couple other options for the EP, but I think these sort of almost pre-chose themselves, like you said.
And it's interesting that there's quite a departure from instrumentation. Like I see acoustic guitar as a very heavy influence here, as opposed to, like, you're known as a piano player, correct?
Yeah, totally,
Yeah. So why guitar?
Well, it's interesting. Like, it kind of came about in a funny way. I mean, I wanted to do an acoustic EP for a while, and I didn't really know what it was going to be. And I thought, well, it could be cover tunes, it could be some of my tunes, it could be tunes drawn from across different albums. And I always kind of thought it would just be me and a piano. And then while playing over the last year and a half, I've been playing with me at piano, singing with a side guitar player. And a few times, either after a show or waiting for a show, the guitar player, in this case Bryn Bessie, was just sort of playing some songs on the guitars, and I was on his guitar, and I would just sort of sing along, and I was like, God, these sound so different. And I've always recorded with piano.
Yeah.
Why don't I just like kick that to the curb for a second and do these with a guitar, just to reimagine them? Like a bit of an experiment. People could have full reign to hate them.
Well, I think it's a funny thing when people see the word acoustic, they're imagining a guitar, not a piano.
Yeah, that's true too.
And that doesn't make sense in a whole bunch of ways, but because the best pianos are acoustic instruments, but I guess it's an expectation there. But in some ways, I guess you kind of reinvented the songs, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like I wanted to do them not only just like, when I really sort of, I came down to sort of putting some pen to paper, I was like, I don't want to do these just like piano acoustic. I want to kind of reimagine them acoustically. And somehow what seemed to really sort of free me up to really try to put emphasis on the words in the stories was having someone else play the instrument and me just singing.
Yeah.
My contribution was just the singing.
Yeah.
Sure, I can play the piano. That doesn't mean I have to.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So how did that feel? How did that go? I mean, again, there's a relationship, right? I mean, that guitar player has to be in sync, right? It has to be in.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did it go?
It was really good. Like Brian Bessie, who is in Regina, a guitar player here, he and I have played together like live for the last year and a half or so. So it was we have enough experience together where like he's feeling my phrasing and I'm feeling his, and so we really trusted each other, and it was pretty nice. It was like unusual on the one hand, and that I wasn't like tucked like propped up on my main crutch, which is this 88 key sort of bass. But it also sort of freed me to breathe into the phrasing more and lean into the stories, which
Yeah.
I kind of realized maybe I don't get to do as much when
Yeah.
you are tied to it.
Yeah. 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 So you see your piano as a bit of a crutch, eh? That's interesting.
In a way, I mean, maybe that's the wrong word, but in a way it is, because like you can, when you're singing, when I'm writing, I kind of realized I was working on a song yesterday and this morning. It's just my natural tendency when I have a break in a vocal line to
Yeah.
insert some piano.
Sure,
Like
of course.
it's just what I do. It's just
Yeah.
sort of part of my machinery,
Right.
and that doesn't have to be the case. And when you're playing with someone else who's playing the instrument, it just becomes a different. Your relationship with the song just immediately becomes
Changes.
different.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. So exciting. So listen, we need to talk a little bit about your show, your Christmas show.
Sure.
And you've done these for a few years, have you?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Yeah. So what can people expect if they come to the basement?
So the show at the basement just got added, which is wonderful. It's December 15th, a very prairie Christmas, wordplay intended, and
Yes.
it's basically Christmas classics and I've written some Christmas songs of my own, and I'll be performing as a trio. And
Oh yeah.
Growing up on the farm, the grain farm I grew up on, I mean, I was a piano player, my mom was a piano player, and there was always the musicians in our neck of the woods always brought their instruments to our house for some unknown reason, and it was always a place where the music would gather, and we just sort of performed these songs, and like we didn't perform them, we played these songs, from evening into the wee hours of the night, and it was just this idea of people getting around and singing songs, laughing in between and telling stories, and that's kind of the vibe I try to present with these.
That's so great. That is so cool. Yeah, I saw a clip of you playing the old upright Heinzman piano, and it was like the sound of that. It's like it reminded me of the parlor that I heard an upright piano in when I was a kid. It was like, wow, there's a very distinctive feel to all of that, and if you can manage to bring that to the basement, that'll be very cool. So who are the other two that are playing with you?
So it'll be Danny Jones the double bass player from Regina. He'll be with me. He sings a bit of backing vocals, and then Bryn Bessie, who played on the recent acoustic recording, he's playing guitar and singing some harmony too.
Very nice, very cool. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna try really hard to make it to that show, Jeffrey.
Well, that'd be great.
Yeah. So we're pretty much at the end of our mile. I like to honor the time because I don't want to hold people up. And I always like to ask people, any closing words, anything that you'd like to say to a Saskatoon audience.
Well, let's see. I'm trying to catch my breath. I'm jonesing for a snack here after this big long walk. But I honestly, I've had really great responses from Saskatoon listeners over the years. I just want to thank everyone for listening and coming along and checking out shows and supporting me and doing what I do.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you again for making this time available. Have a great trip.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Fish and chips it'll be.
and I'm sure you'll enjoy. The British audiences.
I think so. It's going to be a good time.
Interesting. They have a new prime minister, so they'll. It'll be a very interesting dynamic, I'm sure.
It will be.
But let's not talk politics.
No. None of that.
Jeffrey, thank you for this.
I really appreciate the time.
Okay, you take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye.